צבחו ורמשו לא חלקו קדישו דיברו כל נפשו ירין קדישו נבנה ינושו Malchayu, oh Yevat Gevir Tayir Vesimayu, Shvach Kudua, Oile Yachvayu. Rabbi v'noivdai v'sakifi Rabbi v'noivdai v'sakifi Rabbi v'noivdai v'sakifi Muchich remayu v'sakif kififi Muchich remayu Muchich remayu Muchich remayu Zakif kefifi noy, zakif oy kefifi. We lay Rabbi noy v'dayif zakifi, muchich remayu v'zakif kefifi, muchich remayu. Zakif kefifi, we lay Rabbi v'noy v'dayich v'zakifi, muchich remayu v'zakif kefifi, muchich remayu v'zakif kefifi. Oy vey, oy vey, we lay Rabbi v'noy v'dayich v'sakifi muchich remayu v'zakif kefifi muchich remayu v'zakif kefifi B'chishbenayu Kari boyinu Lami boyinu Lami boyinu Lami boyinu Anti maliku Melech Malchayu Yasuna Maribusu da 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 mahina oh la da 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 moi via pai ya samai via pai ya samai mi go
Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom today from the holy city of Jerusalem. Today, the 21st day of the month of Sivan, of the year 5777, 15th of June of the year 2017, and we are reaching ever closer to our great goals of completing our study of the book of Job, and also to complete the tractate of the Mishnah Shabbat. And it will be a great achievement, God willing, that we will have those two great works available with complete commentary from beginning to end, God willing, sometime towards the end of the next week. And today we are advancing steadily towards our goal of completing these great studies. And talking about great, I'll be very grateful to those who are watching on YouTube, if you will be good enough also to sign into the online Bet Midrash of the Zamra website, and that way we can have direct contact during the shiur. It's a great help to me to have some indication of who is listening to this class. Otherwise, it's somewhat talking into the computer camera. So please do just browse to a zamra.org class page and there sign into the online Bet Midrash instant messaging. And with that said, then let us proceed to today's study of the book of Job. Shalom. Today, the 21st day of the month of Sivan of the year 5777, corresponding to the 15th of June of the year 2017. And today we come to the chapter 40 of the book of Job, Sefer Iyov, where we are now at the climax of God's answers to Job out of the whirlwind, and truly most extraordinary passage out of the whole of biblical literature, none to compare with it in the picture it gives us of the elements of creation, of the different species, and of the wondrous hashgacha, providence of God. And this is indeed God's answer to Job. Before we go into the Hebrew text of chapter 40, let us first just take a look at the summary given by the commentator Metzudat David at the end of chapter 39 of how God has answered Iyov so far in chapters 38 and 39. He sums up by saying that one comes out of that first ma'aneh, that first answer to Job by God, is that God reproves him, saying, how did you have the audacity to step forward to cast doubts about me? Do you understand all of my works? And in this chapter, God relates the wonders, the miracles, that it makes no sense at all to consider that these acts of providence could possibly come from the side of some blind mechanism of fate. It's all with perfect and complete providence, and being so, it's impossible to deny the resurrection of the dead. even though that would appear to be completely against nature? And if so, then Job's complaint with respect to the question of reward and punishment no longer has any force, because God has answered this, that God watches providentially over each and every individual, and each one at the time of the judgment, at the time of the resurrection, will receive according to his deeds and actions in his life. And until now, therefore, continues the Mitzudat David. God continues to enumerate his awesome works, saying to him, why, therefore, did you not fear to complain about my works, to cast doubts upon my works? And answers even more that not with justice did Job judge God, that God does not watch over the lower realms, because this is not so, because God has replied to him in this discourse until chapter 39, I am providentially watching over each and every detail, even of the animals and the other creatures. And God explains, as we have seen, the way that he watches over each of the different species according to their needs. And bridging over now to our present chapter, chapter 40, Mitzudat says that God paused from his words of prophecy to Job in order that Job should answer him something. And since Job stood there without answering, now God continues to address Job in our chapter 40. And likewise, the Ramban, commenting on this answer of God to Job, he says that the person that was willing to step forward and to chastise God will now have to be chastised over his words against God, and will have to see that his words against God, against God's lack of providence, were improper. And let us see if the person that is arguing against God will have any answer for this. Because Job had been contesting with his Creator and reproving him. And now that God has spoken about his ways of providence with all of the different creations, the different creatures, if so, will now let Job step forward and start chastising God over those ways. Because now Job knows more about God's ways and paths. So let him now start to reprove God over those ways, his way with the lions, with the ravens, with the peacock, and all of the other creatures. And it is then that Job confesses how lowly and lacking in understanding he was, how despicable he was to have dared to answer back God. And Job will put his hand on his mouth to say that he has no more to answer, as we shall see as we go through the coming verses in the Hebrew text. So with those introductions from our Meforshim, let us go now to the Hebrew text of chapter 40 of the book of Job. After the pause, as you see in the Hebrew written texts, after the end of the previous chapter, chapter 39, there is a parasha petucha, an open parasha, now beginning Vaya'an Adonai es Iyov Vayomar. Once again, God addresses Job, saying, this time, not like the first time at the beginning of chapter 38, and not like we shall see presently in verse 6. Here in verse 1, there is no se'ara. It is a quieter prophecy that God addresses to Job now. Harov im Shaddai Yisor Mochiach Eloah Ya'aneno. Job has remained silent, as indicated by the break between the parashas, so now God challenges him, interrogative, hey, ha'rov, will he that makes riv, contest and strife, im Shaddai, with God who is the eternal God, Shaddai, the aspect of Yesod, the foundation through which all of the influences are channeled into the world. Harov im Shaddai, the one that would challenge God, Yisor. Should he not be chastised? If he is reproving God, let him too be chastised. Mochiach Eloah Ya'aneno. Let he that is reproving Elohah, God, the aspect of Tiferet, the source of all of these influences, and the aspect of Tiferet is the aspect of Mishpat, of judgment. Mochiach Eloah, let he that is reproving God, Ya'aneno, let him answer now all of these questions that have been put to Job in the preceding 2 chapters. And now in humility, Vaya'an Yov et Adonai Vayomar. And Job answered the Lord, and he said, Hein, Kalosi, Mo Hoshiveko, Yodi Samti Lemofi. Hein, indeed, Kalosi, I have been kal, I have been light, I have been needlessly abusive. Mo ashiveko, what shall I answer you? I have no answer. Yodi samti lemo fi. Yodi, my hand have I put into my mouth. Job now understands that the only answer to his question is shtiko, silence, and so he will cease to speak anymore. Achas dibarti velo a'aneh, ushetayim velo osif. Achas dibarti, one did I say, one thing did I say. Velo e'aneh, but I shall not answer. Ushtayim, and 2, velo osif, and I shall not add any more. Rashi explains our verse 5, Achas dibarti, one did I say. Kolomar me'at omarti velo osif od. That is to say, a little did I say already, I will not add any more. There are some of the commentators, continues Rashi, who, on this word achas, they say that Job is alluding to what he had said back in chapter 9, verse 22, Tam v'rosho u'machale, the innocent and the guilty does God destroy. That is to say, achas, it's all one indiscriminate justice. Achas dibarti, I said the one thing, that there's no difference between the righteous and the wicked. Lo, and I have no more to answer about that one. Ushtayim velo osif, continues Rashi, shtayim velo osif, is referring to Job's words back in chapter 13, verse 20, where he asked of God 2 things. One was not to appear against him in full force, and 2, to answer what he was asking. And indeed, God has accepted Job's request because he's come to him in the storm wind, but has not destroyed Job. And God has indeed answered him. As we see, Job has no more to say besides a very short reply later on. But for now, he has no more arguments. In the words of the Metzudat David on this verse, Achas dibarti v'lo ene, one thing have I said and I will not answer. That is to say that the one thing that I said at the beginning when I started to complain that you had handed over everything into the hands of an implacable system of fate. Well, I spoke then, but now I will not answer any more against your words in order to try to strengthen my words, because now I see that you have not handed over everything to an implacable system of fate, but everything is in your hands, in other words, direct providence. But continues the Metzudat David with regard to Ushtayim v'lo osif, two, I shall not add. The two questions that I asked, namely, if everything comes under providence, if so, why should evil come to the tzaddik and why should good come to the wicked? And even though I do not yet know, I still do not know the answer to these questions, I will not ask any more because I fear to doubt your ways. I think that the Ramban's point that Job now understands through God's providence over all creatures that God indeed deals providentially with the righteous and with the wicked, each according to their deserts, particularly after the judgment and the resurrection of the dead. That is why Job has no more answer to God. And therefore, Job will now remain silent. That is to say, he has accepted what God is saying to him. Well, now, from this point on, in verse 6 of our chapter 40, we come to a new ma'aneh, an additional prophecy that comes to Job from God. This time, min se'oro, significant difference between min se'oro, which the kri is from se'ara, from a storm wind. Previously, at the beginning of chapter 38, it was min ha-se'ora, from the storm wind. That is to say, the known storm wind, the storm wind of prophecy. But now God is coming to Job from, according to our commentators, a lower level, from a less intense form of the storm wind in the words that are to come. And what we have now in the remainder of this chapter and the coming chapter 41, which will come to the end of God's answer to Job, what we have is, after the opening section of God's ma'aneh now, what we're going to have is a depiction of two mighty creatures, which will form the summation of God's answer to Job. They are the Behemoth, which is depicted up until verse 24 of our chapter. And then from verse 25 of chapter 40 on to the end of chapter 41, the end of God's ma'aneh, it depicts the Leviathan. These two creatures, the Behemoth is the great land creature, sometimes thought of as the hippopotamus, very mighty creature, and the Leviathan would be a generic name for very, very mighty fish in the sea. But in rabbinic midrash, and in Kabbalah, these two creatures that are now depicted in the rest of our chapter 40 and 41, Behemoth, the mighty animal of the mountains, also mentioned in Psalms, and likewise the Leviathan mentioned in Psalm 104. These mighty creatures are the subject of extensive midrashim in the Talmud and extensive discussion in the Kabbalah. But first of all, let us turn to the pshat, to the simple meaning of these Hebrew chapters, and to understand that seemingly the summation of the whole book is that it is only out of humility that we can come to the knowledge and understanding of God's ways. The humility signified by Job's putting his hand into his mouth to stop himself from speaking. He cannot speak to God. It has to be only through silence that he can hear and grasp answers to his profound questions. And as long as we have not come to humility, then we cannot come to true wisdom. Already this was expressed in the verse earlier in Job's summation, me'ayin v'ha'chochmo me'ayin timotze. Wisdom me'ayin, from where? From out of nothingness is found wisdom. The nothingness is the effacement of our worldly egos. And in these coming depictions of these two mighty creatures, the Behemoth and the Leviathan, which God depicts so graphically to Job, he is saying to Job, see your own helplessness, your own weakness, and understand that God himself rules over all from and casts down the mightiest and the most arrogant. And here indeed is the summation of the whole book of Iyov, that the only way to have knowledge of God is to understand our lowliness and to see God's might, as God now challenges Job to see in this ma'aneh coming now from verses 6 onwards. Vaya'an Adonai es Iyov min se'oro vayomar. And the Lord answered Iyov out of the se'ara, out of a se'ara. There is no hey this time, unlike at the beginning of chapter 38. It is, say the commentators I mentioned, a less intense form of revelation, nevertheless most powerful prophecy. God now challenging Job, who has been so willing to reprove God earlier on. Ezor no chegever chalotzecho esh'olecho v'hodi aini. Ezor no chegever chalotzecho. Ezor no, please bind up, chegever, like a man, chalotzecho, your loins. Again, as we saw earlier, an indication to Job to get stronger and to arise higher out of his earlier straits and sickness. Esh'olecho v'hodi aini. I shall ask you, and you make known to me. Ha'af tofer mishpoti. Tarshi aini lema'an titztok. Ha'af shall indeed tofer, shall you undo, nullify mishpoti, my judgment, as if to say there is no justice. Tarshi aini, shall you rule me rasha, wicked, lema'an titztok, in order that you should be righteous. Job had maintained all the way through that he had not committed a sin, that he was innocent, and therefore why does he suffer? We had seen that Elihu ben Barachel had chastised Job, that even if he had not sinned through action, he had sinned through inaction, through failing to reprove the wicked of his generation. Not enough that he would be righteous, he must bring the world to righteousness. And So we have seen that Job has already received that answer through Elihu. And now God challenges Job, why do you rule me guilty? Is it so that you should appear innocent in the eyes of the three friends who kept on telling you you must have done something that was improper, that caused this suffering? So to justify yourself, you're trying to make God into the wicked. So now start answering me again another series of questions. Ve'im zro'a ko'il loch, uvekol komohu tar'im. Ve'im zro'a ko'il loch. If you have the zro'a, ko'il, like the mighty, powerful arm of God, uvekol komohu, if in a voice and a sound like him, tar'em, you can thunder. Adeno go'on v'gova v'hod v'hodor tilbosh. Adeno, put on yourself as an ornament, adorn yourself now with gaon, with shining brilliance, pride, v'gova, and height, elevatedness, v'hod, majesty, v'hodor, splendor, tilbash, garb yourself in those attributes of God, which now God will put before Job, the attributes of his power, exemplified in the overall treatment of the wicked, and specifically in the figures of the Behemoth and the Leviathan that God himself will have slaughter each other at the end of time. So to look, before we go further into our commentators on these verses, Rashi simply says on verse 8, Ha'af tofer mishpati, will you undo and unwind my judgment? Rashi says, will you try to prove through your words that my justice is crooked, my judgment is crooked? Mitzudat David on this verse 8, he says, God again answers Job in this matter, will you try to undo and nullify my judgment? As if to say, is this not the worst thing that you should, of all that you should consider, that I do not requite the deeds of each person according to their deserts? Are you trying to judge wicked my judgment on account of your considering yourself to be righteous? Because on the question of why the wicked may have it good, there's not such a deep question. Because who could know the hidden character of another person to know whether that person is righteous or wicked? The real question is over a person that knows himself or herself to be righteous and they have it bad. And Job had considered himself to be righteous and that he was greatly afflicted unfairly. And now God says to him, just because of the way that you think about it, on account of your thoughts, are you going to judge my entire system of justice to be wicked? And then on verse 9, Mitzudat David tells us, if you have the mighty arm of strength of God, Im zro'a ko'il loch, you have the mighty arm of strength, says the Mitzudat. A very remarkable comment now. He says, man is made in the image of God. And when a person is wholly in God's image and does not turn in any direction from the path of God, that individual's strength is very great. And indeed, that individual has the power to rule over everything and even over the legions of the heavens. As it says of Joshua in Joshua chapter 10, verse 12, sun stand still in Gibeon, and the sun stood still. And this was that lengthened day through Joshua's righteousness. Had there ever been such a thing that the sun would listen to the voice of a man? And therefore, says the Metzudat David, God is challenging Job. If indeed you consider yourself to be so righteous, and if you have the power, therefore, in your arm, like God, to rule over everything, and if you have the power to thunder like God, to make decrees over the hosts of the heavens, as is proper for a complete and a true tzaddik, if so, as the verse continues, Adeno Gaon, verse 10, Adeno Gaon, then adorn yourself with your justified pride. That is to say that let's test it to see if you do have this power, this greatness, clothe yourself in majesty and splendor to do such wonderful things as will be enumerated in the coming verses. Verse 11, Hofetz avrois apecho, urei chol ge'eh v'hashpilehu. Hofetz, cast forth, spread wide, the avrois apecho, the rage of your wrath and anger. Both of these words, evro and af, are both expressions of furious anger. If you have that power, then do what God does. See every proud and pompous creature, v'hashpilehu, cast him down. Re'i chol ge'eh hachni'ahu, v'hadoch rishoyim tachtom. Re'i chol ge'eh. You look at every righteous, every arrogant individual, hachni'ehu, subdue him, overcome him, humiliate him. V'hadoch rishoim. Hadoch, the verb here is as in of grinding of spices, grind down the rishaim, the wicked, tachtom, in their very place. This is the essential point around which the whole book revolves, that God's work is to humble the arrogant so that all will come to see that God alone rules. And the wicked do not prosper endlessly because God grinds them down in their very place. Tomneim be'ofor yochad, Panehem havosh batomun. Tomneim, cover them over, be'ofor, with the earth, yochad, all together, overthrown with mighty volcanoes and catastrophes and all ending up in the earth. Panehem havosh, bind over, cover over, wrap over their faces, batomun, in the hidden place. They will be hiding their own faces in shame at their deeds. If you have the power to do that, to subdue the arrogant and the wicked, v'gam ani odeko, ki soshia lecho yeminecho. If so, then I will indeed acknowledge you, for your right hand will save you. Gamani odeko, I would acknowledge what you said. If you have the power to do these above enumerated mighty acts against the haughty and the wicked, then if you could do that, I could acknowledge you. It's an obvious scorn and encouraging Job to look carefully at what he is and to repent. To repent and to attain humility. And from now on, in this chapter until the end of verse 24, we have the depiction of the first of these two mighty creatures. Hinei no vehemois asher osisi imoch chotzir kaboko yochil. Hinei no, please, by way of example of the mighty that God will cast down. Hinei no, please consider Behemoth asher osisi imoch. This creature known as the Behemoth. The Behemoth is a prima facie a female form of Behemah. But from the continuation, we see that the verb at the end of verse 15 is in the singular masculine. So this is referring to the Behemoth, which is an unusual form of a masculine noun, referring to this great mountain creature. This creature is mentioned in Psalms 50, verse 10, Behemoth Baharare Olef, the Behemoth in the mountains of 1,000, the 1,000 mountains. He's made with you, says God. That is to say, he's part of my creation, part of the creation in the 6 days of creation. It was on the 6th day that God created the beast and finally man. Says Rashi on verse 15, this Behemoth very simply comments, Muchan le'osid, ready for time to come. And that will, Rashi is here pointing out to the midrash of the allegorical approach of our rabbis to the Behemoth and the Leviathan, as we shall explore later on out of the Talmud. Says Metzudat David on verse 15, Hinei no Behemoth, let us cite the Behemoth. Says Metzudat David, that is to say, if you truly were a completely righteous individual, there would be, my hand, says God, would not be short from paying you your full requites. Look, if I have made such extraordinary creatures as these, that there's no person that can possibly stand against them, therefore who can possibly stand against me to protest against me if I choose to give a person their requites? And the first of these is the Behemah, which I created during the 6 days of creation, and now this creature is still with you with you, and this creature is Chotzir Kaboko Yuchil, the Chatzir, the herbs of the field, are coming into his mouth, like the bakar, like the ox. He eats the herbs of the field. Well, this is significant, says the Metzudat David, that even though the days of this creature are very many, there never comes into its mouth any treif meat, not ever, for he always eats the herbs of the field like the ox. And now comes the depiction of this creature. Just before we go further, let's quote quickly the Ramban here on verse 15, the Behemoth. This, says Ramban, is the name of a very great creature, that there is none on the dry land that is greater than it. And it's with you because it was included in all of the animals and beasts that were created on during the creation. And likewise, the Leviathan is emblematic of the very mighty fish. But he says our rabbis have received the concept of the Behemoth and the Leviathan as being unique individual creations called by these names, and the Kabbalistic teachings on these, he says, fit with the meaning of the verses that are to come, which Ramban does not unveil before us, But to go into the straightforward Hebrew text now, depicting the immense power of this creature, if you wish to imagine a gigantic hippopotamus or some other very mighty creature. From now verse 16, Hinei no chocho v'mosnov v'ono b'shrirei vitno. Hinei no chocho v'mosnov. Here, please, look at this fact. Chocho, its power, b'mosnov, is in its loins. V'ono, its strength, b'shrirei vitno, in the muscles of its belly. Says the Metzudat David, continuing in the line that this creature eats only herbs of the field, he says, even though this creature's never learned to catch any prey, and therefore its strength has never been known in practice, nevertheless this strength is stored up in its loins, in which this creature has immense strength. And the second word for power in this verse, ono, is in the belly of the creature. And Kabbalistically, the Ra'avad, in his introduction to Sefer Yetzirah, mentions that this creature has two facets, two aspects, a male and a female aspect. And the koach is the masculine, the male aspect, and the on is the female aspect. Yachpotz znovo chemo orez, gidei fahadov yisorogu. Yachpotz znovo. Yachpotz is related by Rashi to the root of chafuz, which is immensely hasty in its power and strength. Yachpotz, it is using its tail as a weapon in all directions. Chemo erez, like a cedar, the strength in its zanav, its very tail. Gidei fachadov, the gidim, the sinews of the pachadim. The pachadim would be the testicles of this creature. Yisoyrogu would indicate branching nature of the extension of the veins and the sinews. Atzomov afike nechusho, gromov kimetil barzel. Atzomov, its bones, are afike nechusho. They are strongholds of nechush, of bronze, of a superior metal. Gromov kimetil barzel. It's gromov would be an alternative word for atzamot, for the bones. The gerim is more of an Aramaic word for this. Kimetil barzel, like a great burden of iron. Hu reishis darchi'il, or also yagish harbo. Who, this creature, the Behemoth, reishis darchi'il, is the beginning of the ways of God. Ho'oisoi, he that makes him, God himself, yagesh harbo, shall bring forward his sword, the sword that will come to slaughter this creature at the end. So here, an allusion to those midrashim of the rabbis found here in this sword that will eventually slaughter this behemoth, which is clearly some paradigm force of nature bringing forth the creatures of the world and consuming the world. Kivul horim yis'ulo, v'chol hayas asode yisahaku sham. Kivul horim, for the produce of the mountains, yis'u lo, they will bring them forth to him. Here the parallel verse in Psalm 50 verse 10 speaks about God not needing anybody to feed the Behemoth, because God's emissaries bring forth the produce of the mountains for him. All of the beasts of the field will play there, playing, knowing that this is not an animal of prey. He does not prey upon other beasts and animals. Verse 21, Tahas Tse'elim Yishkov, Besiser Kone Uvitzo. Tachas Tse'elim Yishkov, under the shadows shall he lie. Besiser Kone Uvitzo, in the secrecy of the reeds and the mud of the swamp. It's this verse perhaps that has given the suggestion that we're talking here of some creature like a hippopotamus. On the other hand, the Metzudat David interprets this as a question to Job. Here's this immense behemoth creature. Does it need to hide away in the shadows? Does it need to be in a place of secrecy of the reeds? So Rashi says that this creature, the Behemoth, is the Rosh LaBehemoth, the head of all of the animals. It's known Kabbalistically that the aspect of Behemah also refers to the Malchut, the aspect of the kingdom. Says Rashi on verse 20 that they bring him the produce of the mountains. He brings the verse in Psalms chapter 10 where it says that about the Behemoth, Baharei El, the Behemoth in the mountain, the 1,000 mountains. 1,000 mountains bring their produce to him, and each and every day he feeds off all of them. So all of this evoking the immense power of this animal lying there. Yesukuhu tse'elem tzillelo. Yesubuhu arvi nohal. Yesukuhu, they shall cover him over tse'elim tzillelo, the shades of his shadow. Yisubuhu arvei nochal, they shall surround him, the arvei nochal, the willows of the valley stream. Again, Metzudat interprets all this as God's question to Job, as if to say that he doesn't need to hide away in secrecy, and the shadows do not need to cover him. There's nothing in the world that could possibly cover over him. Not all of the willows would be sufficient to shade this animal from the sun. And now continuing to evoke the immense consumptive powers of this creature. Drinking now, we've had its food, the grass, a very pure form of food, pure vegetation, and now pure waters. Verse 23, Hin ya'ashok nohor v'lo yachpoz yiftach ki yogiach yardin el pihu hein ya'ashok nohor. Indeed, verily, a further fact about this creature that God alone has the power to humble. Hein, verily, ya'ashok nohor. It steals away the river. V'lo yachpoz. He will not be in a hurry to do so. He gulps it all up without even rushing. The river flows into its mouth, drinking up the water of the river. Yivatach, he shall trust. Ki yogiach yardein el pihu, for he shall cause to flow the Yarden, the river, flowing down into his mouth. Well, Rashi on verse 23 interprets the Nahar as referring to the Parath, the Euphrates, whose waters are very rich and multiplying, a great river that this creature steals from everyone by drinking it all down, and he has no need to strengthen himself in his belly to be able to swallow and keep down all of that water. He's quite confident that he'll be able to draw the entire Jordan down into his mouth, were he to be drinking up the Jordan. And after all that, verse 24, Be'enov yikochenu, b'mokshim yinkov off. After all of this strength, now the downfall of the Behemoth, depicted in verse 24. Be'enov yikochenu, with his eyes shall he take him. That, says Rashi, is the eyes of God, with which, by looking at the Behemoth, he will take him, in the sense that the Behemoth will be filled with terror and quaking at God's might before him. B'mokshim yinkov och, with the mokesh. The mokesh is a trap. These are the tools, says Rashi, of the hunters that with which they spear the fish and draw them up. So yinkov off, he will pierce the nose of the Behemoth with these mokshim, with these barbed instruments, in order to trap this great animal. That will be the end of this animal, quickly depicted by God simply looking at the animal, and with that the animal will fall into the trap. So until here is the depiction of the Behemoth, and it's surprising that those who divided up the printed Bibles did not put an end of a chapter here, which is where we shall end, because the coming verse 25 of chapter 40, Timshoch Livyoson B'chako, continues with the theme of trapping an animal or a creature, but here we turn now from the Behemoth to the second of these great creatures, the Leviathan. Can you drag the Leviathan, mighty whale, with the chakor, with the barb with which fish are caught? Of a chevel tashkia l'shono, will you with a rope be able to push down its tongue when it's trapped? So we shall leave the depiction of the power of the Leviathan, the second example of God's power to crush the arrogant, in our next session. And with that, my dear friends, we bring to a close for today our studies of the Tanakh, and I'll be back in just a few minutes with the help of God for our studies in the Mishnah.
Rabbi Noib Daich Vesakifin Rabbi Noib Daich Vesakifin Muchich Remayu Vesakif Kififin Muchich Remayu Muchich Remayu Muchich Remayu Vesakif Kififin Vesakif Zakifin, Muchich Remayu, Zakif Kefifin, Muchich Remayu, Zakif Kefifin. Rabbi Noib Daich Zakifin, Muchich Remayu, Zakif Kefifin, Muchich Remayu. Remayu, Zakif Kefifin, Muchich Remayu, Zakif Kefifin. Lichigim Ashliyin Alchiyyin, Yayoim Givir Taich, Bechishbenayu, Kari Boyinu, Labi Boyinu, Labi Boyinu. Yomayu Anti Maliku Melech Malchayu Yasuna mi yipi maribusu ta da 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 mahina oh ila da da ta da 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 moi vi apai yasamai vi apai Yasamai mi goy kuli Yesu ta da 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 moy vei oy na da da ta da 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 moy hamahba ydi bikhavat mikol imayu Kari Behemoth in Ulam Yolim Havayu Anti Malku Melech Malchayu Uivad Gevitach Vesimayu Tanana Yidana Lidom Uivei Oyoy Hey na 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 yo 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 la 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 oh la 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 shvar kudum achle havayu למקדושה תהי, למקדושה תהי, למקדושה תהי ולקודש קידשי. Ay 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 ay. Oy vey, asachti vayechti, asachti vayechti, asachti vayechti derichin benavavshi. Ay 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 ay. Oy vey, bizamrin lovach, shirin ravach, birishlay mikartu deshifrayu.
Shalom again, my dear friends. Shalom. Back to our studies now. And now we turn to our studies in the Mishnah. Shalom. Today, the 21st day of the month of Sivan of the year 5777, corresponding to the 15th of June of the year 2017. We continue our studies in Masachet Shabbat, Tractate Shabbat, now in chapter 22, continuing from where we left off at the end of the second Mishnah, and we now begin with the third Mishnah of chapter 22. The second Mishnah had been talking about rules of heating up foods that had been cooked before the Shabbat and not being allowed to treat work on foods that were very easily, quickly cooked. And now in the third chapter we come to a related subject, the subject of opening containers of food on the Shabbat. And our Mishnah 3 begins, Shover Odom es echovis lechol hemeno grogorois. A person may indeed on the Shabbat Shover, break the chovis, break the barrel. Le'echol emenu grogoros, in order to eat from it the grogoros. These are the dried figs that were dried out in the summer to provide nourishment during the winter months and will be stored in a barrel that will be sealed. And to break off the top of the barrel in order to get to the food inside, if the barrel had not been opened from before the Shabbat, that will be permitted. Only that he should not have the intention of making a vessel. In other words, he should not be cutting off the top of the barrel in such a way as to make a nice opening that he will later be able to close up again. It is permitted on the Shabbat to actually break something if this on the Shabbat serves some constructive purpose. And in our time, parallel things would be to break open the food products that may be either in cans or bottles or in packages, subject to certain restrictions. This may be done on the Shabbat when breaking open a package of a food. If there are letters on the package, which in our times is very likely, one must avoid actually tearing up the writing on the Shabbat, which is under the category of blotting out writing, and that would be forbidden. It is necessary to make some kind of cut in the wrapping to avoid cutting the letters. In the case of a can, if somebody is opening a can on the Shabbat, as we find in our Mishnah, that one must not have the intention of making a vessel. Some people do use their opened, drained and washed cans for various purposes. You may not open a can on the Shabbat in such a way as to leave yourself with a usable vessel, but to break open the can in some way and without having the intention of using the can later on, that would be permitted. So now continuing with similar laws relating to the opening of things on the opening of food and beverage containers. Ve'ein noikvin megufo shel chovis. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. In the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, one may not pierce the stopper of a barrel. This could be a barrel of wine or oil you needed for the Shabbat. According to Rabbi Yehuda, one may not pierce a hole in from the top. V'chachomim matirin. However, the other sages permit this. There is a different girsah, different reading of our Mishnah, that in the place of Chachomim, the other sages, it says this is Rabbi Yosei. So in this case, the halacha is like the Chachamim. It is in fact, according to the halacha, permitted to pierce a hole in the top of a barrel. This would also apply if one were trying to open the top of a bottle in our time, be it a plastic bottle or a glass bottle that has a little cap, be permitted to pierce a hole in the cap. There are some say that you cannot break open the cap normally because the intention of breaking open the cap is to leave yourself with a cap to later on screw onto the bottle. And so there are some who say that in order to open the bottle on the Shabbat, if the cap had not been unscrewed from before the Shabbat, it would indeed be necessary to pierce a hole in it so as not to create a little utensil, a new stopper for the bottle. The Mishnah continues, V'lo yikoveno mitzido. He should also not, in taking off the stopper of the bottle, not pierce a hole in its side. And that is to say that where the other rabbis against Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, where they say that you may pierce a hole in the stopper, it may only be from the top but not from the side, because that would be a normal way of producing some kind of exit for the contents of the bottle. So in that case it would be necessary to just take out the stopper, not to pierce a hole in the side. Continues the Mishnah, after having opened the stopper in some way or pierced the hole in a permitted way, lo yiten oleo shavo mipnei shehu memoreach. One should not put upon it wax. In other words, to stop up the opening pierced by the perforation, one should not squeeze into it some wax. Mipnei shehu memoreach, that comes under the category of the forbidden labor of memoreach, which would translate into English as spreading intentionally in some shape or form some pliable material, whether that would be a cream or whether it would be some glue, or here the wax, where the intention is to push the wax into the hole in order the wax will take the form of the hole and act as a stopper closing up the barrel. And this labor memoreach is forbidden at root on account of the labor in the sanctuary of working the leathers. As part of the working of the leathers in the sanctuary, they had to be smoothed over. And smoothing over would also come under the category of moreach, which is used today for smoothing over and spreading a cream on the body, also used to spread butter on bread. Spreading butter on bread is permitted on the Shabbat. But for here, where the purpose is to mold the material to perform some tikkun, some repair to the vessel by stopping it up, that would come under this forbidden labor, moreach. Omar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda now reports to us, Maaseh bo Lifnei Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai ba'arov. There was an actual happening, a case of the above, where somebody thought that they might have smeared wax over the stopper on the Shabbat. It came before Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Came before Rabban Yochanan was the head of the Sanhedrin in the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, and here he is found to be in Arov, which is the name of a place, be it Arabia, perhaps where many exiles from Jerusalem went at the time of the Roman oppression. The case came before Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'omar. His response was, Chosheshni loy mechatos. Chosheshni, I have a suspicion, as far as he's concerned, for the obligation of a sin offering. That is to say that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said that if it were the case that he had indeed spread the wax over the stopper on the Shabbat to stop it up over the hole, and then he would indeed be liable to a chatos. The reason here for the expression choshesheni, I have a chashash, I have a suspicion he might be liable to a chatat, is because the way that apparently we can infer from this expression that that everybody agreed that if the act had been done, then he would be liable to the sin offerings. We heard in the previous section of the Mishnah, Lo yiten lo shava mipnei shuma moreach. He cannot put the wax on it because it is a case of moreach, one of the forbidden labors. So Rabban Yochanan was saying, if the act had been done, which the individual was apparently not certain about, then he would definitely be liable to a sin offering. So now, continuing with these Mishnayot relating to dealing with foods on the Shabbat, now we come to speak about ways of keeping foods warm or taking the chill off them in the days before refrigerators and the days before our kinds of ovens and heaters. Mishnah Dalet, the fourth Mishnah of chapter 22, Noisanim tafshil lesoch habor. One may put a dish inside a pit excavated in the ground, bishvil sheyei shomur, in order that it should be guarded from the heat. If you do not have a refrigerator, then by putting something down in a pit dug in the earth before the Shabbat, that will protect it from the heat of the sun, and there is no prohibition in this. Our commentators say that one might have thought that we'd be afraid he might start excavating the pit on the Shabbat, or he might try to smooth out its base to enable the pot to stand firmly, but that is not the case. It's permitted to put the dish inside the pit on the Shabbat. Ve'es hamayim ayofim beruim. One could take good water in a vessel and put them in bad water, let's say not drinking water, be it in a stream or a gutter or somewhere. The good water may be placed in the bad water, bishvil sheyitzanu, in order that they should be chilled. Vesatzoinen bechamo bishvil sheyechamu. Likewise, chilled liquids, if you wanted to heat them up a bit, you'd be able to put the jar out into the sun, the bottle out into the sun, and let it absorb the heat from the sun. That is permissible on the Shabbat. You might have thought that, since we had learned much earlier in our tractate that we cannot put things in a state of hatmana, where they're hidden away in insulating material and covered over with insulating material. Well, we may do that but from before the Shabbat, but not on the Shabbat. But here in these cases, these actions are not forbidden on account of any suspicion he might come to hatmana, for example, to put a chilled bottle into warm earth, which we already saw is forbidden much earlier in the tractate, but here to put it out in the sun to take the chill off would be permitted. Well, now we start moving to the subject of what to do if your clothes get wet on the Shabbat. The fourth Mishnah, Misha Nosru Kelov B'derech B'mayim. If somebody's clothes got wet on the road with water, if he was out walking and there were puddles or a stream, or his garment dropped off him and got soaked in the water, what can you do? Mahalech bohen ve'ein choishesh. He is allowed to go carrying the dripping garments on him. The presumption is that he is out in an open area where he cannot carry the garment, but he could wear it and come to... we don't require him to leave it where he is, where it got wet on the Shabbos. Mahalech bohen ve'ein choishesh. He may go with them without worrying. Higia lechotzer achitzoino. But once he reaches the outer courtyard of the village or the town where he lives, sheitchon b'chamo, he may spread them out in the sun. Aval loy keneged ha'om. However, not in front of people, where people can see him. He may spread them out to dry in the sun, but not where anybody could see what he's doing. Well, this is a Mishnah that requires further comment with regard to its halachic ramifications. For one thing, we are hearing that we are not going to forbid the person from wearing his clothes if they got wet. As we shall see, there is a suspicion that if one's clothes are wet, one might come to squeeze them out. But here we do not decree the person must not wear these clothes anymore on the Shabbat if he's out there, for fear he might come to squeeze them, because great is the honor we give to human beings, and we do not require a person to strip just because his clothes got wet. He need not worry about this. What we do want him to do is at the first opportunity to take those wet clothes off. Now, our Mishnah says that he can leave them out to dry as long as he doesn't do so in front of other people. The presumption is that if other people were to see him drying out his clothes on the Shabbat, they might think that he had transgressed the prohibition against washing and laundering of clothes on the Shabbat. Without knowing that he got wet on the path, they might think he'd been laundering on the Shabbat against the halacha, and that's why he should hide it from people. The Talmud says that this Mishnah expresses an earlier view that was superseded by a later view that even in the privacy of one's own home, one should not do anything that would be forbidden to do in front of other people. And so the actual halacha is that if one's clothes got wet on the Shabbat, while you may wear them until you get into the yard, when you take them off, you cannot hang them up to dry as such. You may lay them down somewhere or drape them over a chair or whatever, but you cannot arrange them to dry, to spread them out to dry. And even if nobody was there to see it, you may not do this, because the view in our Mishnah was superseded by the later view that something that should not be done in front of other people should not even be done in the privacy of one's own home. So now coming on to other issues related to drying of fabrics. If somebody was bathing on the Shabbat in the waters of a cave, or in the waters of Tiberias, the hot springs and waters of Tiberias, which we have already heard about much earlier in our tractate in chapter 3, we heard about the waters of Tiberias, the warm waters, and we there learned that one may not heat up water on the Shabbat or even bathe one's whole body in waters that have been heated up from before the Shabbat by humans. But where the hot water is natural, our Mishnah tells us that if one had bathed in them, if the person dried himself with even 10 towels, lo yivi'em biyodo, he must not bring those towels back home by hand. Aval asora b'nei odom mistapkin ba'aluntis achas b'neihem yedeim v'ragleim u'mvi'in oiso b'yodon. But 10 people would be allowed to dry with one towel after having bathed in the waters of the mikveh in the cave. It was one person, even with a minimal amount of water on the towel, he may not carry it out, says our Mishnah, for fear that he will come to squeeze the towel dry. When it was his own clothes, we didn't stop him from wearing them. But if it's a towel, we fear he might squeeze it dry. But if it's 10 people altogether, even with just one towel, which is soaking wet, we allow them to carry the towel because we do not fear they will squeeze it. They will all remember. The actual halacha is that even an individual person with one towel may, if he is in a Reshut HaYachid, in a yard, carry it from one place to the other. The only way one could carry a towel out into the street in the public domain would be by adapting it as a kind of scarf or a garment, but to carry it in one's hands would be forbidden. But where one is in a Reshut Yachid, in a private domain, one may carry around the towel. It's not considered that we fear that he's going to squeeze it. And now, continuing in the 6th Mishnah with issues relating to personal care, after having been dealing with bathing on the Shabbat and washing, sochin umamashmashin bivnei me'ayim. It is permitted to anoint yourself with oil. You can rub in oil. Umamashmashin bivnei me'ayim. You are actually allowed to massage the abdomen area. According to other versions of our Mishnah, the word mamashmashin is just without the b'nei me'ayim, and it's taken to mean that one may massage oneself all over the body. That is the interpretation of Rav Ovadia Bartanura. Over the whole body, one may massage for pleasure, for the pleasure that it gives. Avoloi misamlin, but one may not use toil and exertion in such a massage. Another explanation of misamlin would be not to do a workout on the Shabbat that brings a person to sweat. V'lo misgoredin, nor should one be scraping one's skin with some kind of scrape as a part of the process of anointment and culture of care of the skin. It is permitted to rub in the oil lightly, to massage lightly, but not to do a very sharp and hard massage, nor to do a workout that causes sweating, and one cannot scrape off the excess oil. En yordin le kordimo, vein oisin apiktozim, a number of different versions of this word here. En yordin le kordimo, one may not go down into the Kordima swamp. Here in Israel we have by the Yam HaMelach, the Salt Sea, the so-called Dead Sea, swampy areas where there are very dangerous mud bogs that people can sink into, and only with great difficulty can they be rescued from there. If they indeed can be rescued, one should not go down to such places on the Shabbat. We've been talking about places to go bathing, not here in the swamps. Vein oisen apik doizen, one cannot use emetics to induce vomiting. it was custom among some classes in Mishnaic times after eating to vomit out the food to be able to eat yet more. That is not permitted. It is permitted actually if one needs to induce vomiting to use one's fingers down the throat, but not to use some medication that is supposed to cause vomiting. Ve'ein ma'atzvin es hakoton. One may not arrange the limbs of the katan, the baby. Ve'ein machazirin es hashever. Nor may one restore a fracture. This is the original Mishnah here. The halacha rejects this Mishnah. The halacha is not like this Mishnah. The Mishnah in the first instance with a newborn baby is talking about the need to arrange the limbs of the baby after it's passed through the constrictions of the birth channel. Ma'atzivin, in contemporary Hebrew, the word itzuv refers to design and arrangement. Ma'atzev grafi is a graphic designer. Matzivin es hakoton, one should not arrange the limbs of the baby, says the original Mishnah. That is not the halacha. It is certainly permitted to put the limbs of the baby in order after birth. Ve'ein machazirin es hasheva, one cannot return a fracture to its proper position. Again, that is not accepted by the halacha. The halacha is that one may use manipulations to set back in place a fracture. Finally, mishe nifrako yodoi v'ragloi. If a person's hand or his foot had become dislocated, lo yitrafeim betzoinen, one cannot splash over cold water over the dislocation on the Shabbat. He would be allowed to wash the area with water in his usual way without using a splashing attempt to heal it on the Shabbat. All of these are decrees that were introduced to avoid people coming to grind up medications on the Shabbat. And with that, we conclude chapter 22 of Mishnah Shabbat. So with that, my dear friends, we conclude our studies for today. I would like to wish you Shabbat Shalom now from Jerusalem, and with the help of God, I will be here on Sunday at 1600 hours for Israel time for continuing in our Kollel, reaching now the summation of the book of Job with the evocation of the Leviathan and the closing chapters of Masechet Shabbat, the next chapter in particular of very, very great interest with subjects that we have not so far covered in the tractate, the subject of things one may or may not speak about on the Shabbat. So with that, my dear friends, we conclude our studies for today, and I wish you Shabbat Shalom from Yerushalayim Yir HaKodesh, the holy city of Jerusalem.